new year, I thought perfect time and opportunity to talk about new hobbies that you might want to start this year, and that includes sewing, maybe some pattern making once you get advanced. You know, ring in the new year, start a new hobby, start a new thing to obsess over, find new ways to avoid your friends and family. Maybe you want to start sewing, maybe you've already started sewing, you just want a else's perspective. Go over some tools that I thought would be helpful to just like start you on your journey of sewing, and kind of like just explain everything and why I think that it's helpful, or like why I think it'd be helpful for you. And then you can kind of make the decision if you feel the same way. Good, necessary essentials to start your new sewing career. Okay, so new you, new year, new hobbies. Let's get it started. The first two obvious ones are a sewing machine. First, for the sewing machine, I just recently got this little baby girl. She has been with me for about 2 years. I got her from Joann's. She is honestly a decent price. I got her on a Black Friday sale because that seemed appropriate. My last machine was I had her for over 15 years. She kind of was just not doing so hot. I really just wanted to invest in myself and get a new machine. I knew that my experience would be better, so this is the one that I chose. I did do research. I did a lot of research on some lovely other YouTubers who'd like recommended a bunch of machines. They kind of went over all of them, different price points. This one really is like a nice second level entry. Brother is a solid brand, and if you do want to invest in something, I had a Singer before. This is my first Brother machine, and honestly, I've loved both. So she is a Brother, strong and tough, just like me. No, I'm not at all. This is my first digital machine. My previous machine, my Singer, was non-digital, so manual, I guess. It didn't have like this little digital screen, so you kind of hand did everything at the top. So I was kind of a little nervous to get one. I don't know why. I think I was like worried about, like where the world's going, all these subscription fees. They just keep taking over and changing the rules on everything. And I was like, let me just think this one through. If you had the same worries, I've already thought about all that for you. Normally they do come with like a sewing pedal that you use your foot on. I'm sure you guys have seen that. The reason why I do kind of like this one is that it does come with a pedal, but it also starts with a button, with this little button, which I do find helpful. I actually don't even use my pedal at all now. I kind of forgot that they existed, if I'm being honest, but I do use my pedal on a different sewing machine. So when I do use that one, I have that experience. But she's been good to me, no complaints. I would recommend her. I haven't had any issues. It does have like a self-threading situation here. I still haven't figured out how to use that, so I just do it myself. If anyone has any tips, let me know. I just don't bother with it. I kind of forgot that it existed, so. But it does. That is a pro. See, she has instructions on the top on how to thread the machine. I think do your own research. You could thrift one. You could ask a family member if they have one they want to donate. This one ran me about $280, I think. $275, $280, somewhere around there. And with tax, maybe it was $300 for everything because I did purchase insurance on it just to be safe. I do recommend that. I did get like a 3-year one, and I think she's a great starting machine as well. Next, fabric. My favorite thing about sewing, fabric. I love fabric. I honestly could do like a whole separate video on fabric alone because I do have a lot of knowledge in fabric because I do work in the fashion industry. Specifically, I do design and product development. A lot of my job is just working on fabrics. I do have a lot of knowledge in that for the most part. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but intermediate. Fabric is my favorite thing though of this entirety because it really just makes the garment. Tips for finding fabric. You don't have to buy expensive fabric to get anything started. There are a plethora of price ranges in fabric. The fabric probably is a lot of the cost of obviously the major things like a sewing machine and your time. You could find cheap fabric. My tips are to go to the thrift store. They usually have either old garments you can cut apart and use for fabric. B, they have old blankets. Some people donate fabric. So personally go to this place near me that has like dead stock fabrics that a lot of people donate. It's really like half the price of like Joann's and everything. And maybe you have one locally next to you. That could be a good idea. Look into that, There's also like some discount stores that also do something similar. The major ones are Joann's. There's an array that they have there, but sometimes I'm annoying and like want to not get something that everyone else has. So that's my issues, not yours. Do like going and getting mine secondhand. My downtown has like a fashion district, so you can go down there. Fabric prices necessarily aren't any cheaper than Joann's, but they have more of a selection and you can walk around, touch, feel everything. Especially in the beginning, I think it's nice to touch and feel everything. But also another option is to go online. And there's so many fabric stores online that you could go to. My personal favorites are Etsy. But you got to be a little careful. Just really make sure, like, just kind of go into a fabric store touching things first, because if you don't have a background in fabrics or like know anything about them, I think it's best to touch them first and, feel them in your hands, see how it is compared to ordering online. But that's advanced. You can get there later. A lot of them, and that also goes along with trims that you might need. Same places you can get all that. That's the sewing machine. Thanks, girl, for everything you've done for me. Okay, rest of the tools that you might need. Needles. I could do probably a whole video on needles too, but needles are very essential. They are the thing that poke into your fabric and make it happen. There's different types of needles. In the beginning, I don't want to bore you with every needle type that you should be getting or looking into, but essentially a universal needle, those are universal. Your machine should also tell you any specific needle brands that you might need. I have a brother one, and they are fine with universal needles, so I haven't had an issue with mine specifically. There's different needles for different fabric types. There's different needles for different weight of fabric. Usually when you get your sewing machine, they kind of give you like a little cheat sheet to tell you about that. Stay with the easy part and just get a universal needle for the beginning, and you'll learn as you go. There's also sewing needles for handwork that you could get. I have both personally, and I also have a plethora of different needles in case I need one for every certain project type. Next one, very obvious, is thread. Thread, another favorite. No, a plethora of different types, contents, sizes. I won't bore you with that at all, but for the most part, a universal one that you could use is an all-purpose polyester thread. Also, thread you could thrift. A lot of people donate thread for cheaper option. Yeah, I mostly use a polyester all-purpose thread, but there's some other projects that require a heavier thread. There's other projects that require like a cotton thread. Pins and clips. This is what you'll need to like keep your projects on track. They are basically like a stabilizer to help the sewing process better, because at the end of the day, this is the girl that's going to do the work for you, but you need to guide her. You need to be her mommy to help guide her in the best way that you can to complete a project. That was cringe, but you know what? That is true. You are the maker. You need to get your hands in there. I prefer pins and clips because I like to use them for different reasons. Typically for heavier fabrics, I like to use clips, and for lighter weight fabrics, I tend to use pins, but also that kind of flip-flops back and forth depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes pins are easier, sometimes pins are annoying. Maybe for starters, maybe clips are easier, honestly. Pins can snag a fabric on accident, but that's kind of all trial and error, so I don't know. Next thing is scissors. Very important for cutting out anything. You cannot just be using your kitchen scissors. Don't use your scissors that you use to open boxes. I don't know, whatever you use scissors for. Don't use the same ones. Fabric is very delicate. It requires a different type of scissor. You need specifically a fabric scissor. Basically, the essentials are you need a pair of fabric scissors, and if you're going to be using patterns that you need to cut out from that are paper, you'll need a pair of paper scissors. So fabric scissors, paper scissors. For trimming your threads on here, this one's nice because it does have a thread trimmer on the side, makes it easy, but also I like to get a little pair of clippers, and those are really helpful because they're small, they are easy to get to little things. Sometimes having a pair of fabric scissors trying to cut out a little piece of thread and trim off something is obnoxious. I do think a little pair of clippers is a great essential item as well. I also suggest getting a cutting board because you don't want to cut on your wood floor, cut on your tile, otherwise you might hurt it. If you're using fabric scissors, maybe it's not much as a necessity, but I do recommend having a cutting board. I personally have a cutting board because I like to use a rotary cutter. I also have an electric cutter for cutting my fabric. I have every option of cutting that you can imagine. Different cutting tools for different things. If you are going to use a rotary cutter, which I tend to find much easier than using scissors for cutting, I personally have a like 30-inch by 40-inch or something like that. Superstar. If you're going to start somewhere, you can either invest in some fabric scissors or rotary cutter. And I think a rotary cutter is easier just because you're able to get around curves really nicely. And with fabric scissors specifically, it does tend to like lift the fabric up as you're cutting it. So sometimes I make mistakes. You could still make a mistake with any scissors, if I'm being honest, but I personally like a rotary cutter the best. But if you already have some fabric scissors that you've been donated to you, just use those. The next thing you definitely need is an iron, which hopefully maybe you have one already. I don't know, people are really into steaming these days, so maybe you don't have an iron. Irons, essential. Essential, essential, essential. If you're gonna ever make a garment, I really suggest having a good iron. Ironing is 50% of why your garment's gonna look good, and that's the truth of it. Iron, 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 iron. You wanna iron after every step, and your garments look nice. So a good iron would be good. So the little bonus things that are definitely helpful are some sewing markers or some sewing chalk. Once you start to get into like a little bit further into your sewing journey, it's just nice to have things marked. So when you get on the sewing machine, you kind of remember where exactly you were supposed to do the exact turn or pivot. For button placement, having some type of marker, or for hemming something. There's a lot of reasons why you could use a marker. I don't necessarily use them that often myself, but I do think that they are nice to have in your collection for when you do have something like you need to mark a dart. There's also some other tricks around that where you don't necessarily need a marker for that. You could use some thread to mark things or pins. So it really just depends. You might be fine without them, honestly. They're not really an essential for your first time into this. I think some bonus options. Bonus items. A sewing book. I have this sewing book that I've had since college, and I've kept it this whole time and started recently reusing it, and there's a lot of helpful information in there. So if you're a visual learner, I think it's nice to double check your thought process. Maybe the pattern that you got doesn't necessarily explain it to the way that's visually pleasing for you or for you to understand. Maybe it's just words and not a lot of instruction on things. Also, YouTube, go and type in anything into that search engine. How do I sew an elastic in a sleeve? You could find, the internet has everything. For the most part, maybe not everything, which is why I started some videos, because it is missing a little bit. I don't know, just saying. And they do have pictures in there. Also some advice that like maybe YouTube wouldn't have necessarily. It has it all in one place. You can really like go into anything that you need to. Another essential thing is a seam ripper, because you're going to be making a lot of mistakes and you need to rip them out. And that is kind of the nice part about this in general, is like sewing can be necessarily temporary. You could rip out, maybe like made a crooked line, maybe didn't do the dart correctly. You have to like rip these things out and start over. Or maybe you're cutting up an old garment and repurposing it. Seam ripper. And then also be careful with seam rippers. They are a little dangerous and you don't want to prick yourself like I have many times. But that also kind of, brings you a little strong and toughness. Rulers. But rulers are very important to me, especially when you start getting into pattern making, specifically for sewing. If you're just worried about sewing, I really recommend this. It is ironable. So like example for like when you're hemming something and you need to like flip up a hem. So I do find it helpful to have an ironable ruler. They're not very expensive and you can put them on the iron and like really like fold things to the perfect measurement. Once you start to get into pattern making or maybe doing some more advanced things, you can get some pattern making rulers, and there's a whole plethora of those. French curve ruler, there is a clear ruler, I don't know the technical names, but there's lots of rulers. Also, if you plan on doing like some quilting, I would get one of those like little square rulers that help make perfect symmetrical squares, or they also have triangular ones that you could get, and those are really helpful for like little projects that you might have if you don't want to get like the whole big old thing. Just some ideas to get you started. Another thing, some weights. Some fabric weights. Having a weight is really essential because then it helps the fabric not move while you're cutting it. And a lot of fabrics can be slippery. They can like gotta go out in different places, and your fabrics can get unaligned before you're even, done cutting them. I suggest getting some fabric weights. I have some really good ones that are cheap from Home Depot. They're just, I don't even know what they are, honestly. They're like little donut things. Little silver donut things from Home Depot. Ask the man there.
Washers.
Thank you. They are washers. Extra big washers. Ask your local Home Depot man for that. Good entry level into some sewing weights, some other professional ones that you can get into that are bigger, that really hold the fabric down. I only have one. I should probably get some more actually. That would be helpful. Your final item that you need for sewing is, congratulations, patience. Patience will be your number one essential tool in this. And give yourself a break. It's not an easy thing to start just at random, just like everything else that you probably have learned, in life. You're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to start over.
Pause. I wanted to add in some honorable mentions. I wanted to show some other tools that I have in my collection that are helpful, but not necessarily an essential. A tailor's ham, this is what I use to iron out on uncurved seams. A bias tape maker, you use this when you need to make some bias tape. A buttonhole spacer, I just recently got this and it's a game changer to make sure that all your buttons are even. And that's all.
I just realized I've just hit my 15 years in the industry, and that is pretty crazy to think about because I'm 22. Don't say anything. Crazy how I could be doing this job 15 years when I'm only 22. Don't know how that works. I started seriously sewing about 4 years ago, and I really got back into it during the lovely COVID years. It really kind of like kicked me in the butt to kind of start getting back into my hobby that I kind of like ditched for a while. And wow, have things changed. Really have grown a lot, and I'm at my point where I started self-drafting my own patterns. Basically, you can do it. The biggest part is just learning how to sew. You got to get in there, start with some easy projects first. Sew some scrunchies, sew some makeup bags, sew some pillowcases, anything to get you started. Maybe like hem a couple things at first. I also was thinking about making like a pattern making essentials video, so let me know if you're interested in that. Creativity will keep your brain going, so keep it going. Practice makes perfect, you know? Then you get to make some beautiful things like this lovely vest that I made last year. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With my thrifted buttons and thrifted fabric. I hope that this was helpful in any way. You can leave any questions down below. I mean, we all need a little problem solving in our lives, so why not start something that'll continuously give you problems? I feel like creativity is a constant muscle that you have to keep going with, and experimenting with new things I think is great for you. Maybe that's why you want to follow along, you know? Also, if you're interested, I have my intro into self-drafting my blocks on my channel. I have cute little some sewing tutorials or some sewing vlogs. And for when you want to advance more pattern making, that's where you go next. And fabric knowledge. Anyway, thanks for watching. Happy sewing and see you soon. Bye.